From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
Welcome into the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host for today, Andre Johnson Jr. That's Sean Fazende on the other side. He is on his way back from a joint practice in Carson, California in the car. But, you know, we got to get this pod in. But before we do, make sure to like, share, rate, and review. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that button below. Subscribe so that every time we post an episode, you don't miss any fire content and you get that bell notification. If you're watching on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network, hello, I'm glad you have found us here. You see me wearing this Pelicans shirt. We got a lot of Pelicans games coming up on that network this year, but we're not here to talk about the Pelicans today because, like I mentioned, Sean is on his way back from watching the Saints have a joint practice with the Rams. Sean, how you feeling?
Doing all right, Andre. I gave the podcast viewers and yourself a little different view today. We had a lot of stuff to do after the joint practices, so I figured we would give you guys a little taste of the drive home from Carson. Drive back from Carson to Costa Mesa. A little look right there at the.
There we go.
Actually, not bad. LA traffic. It was a little bad earlier driving down the 405 here, so we should be back. Probably by the time we finish this pod, we should be back in Costa Mesa. But, man, it's been an energetic, it's been a action-packed week, and it was an action-packed day for the Saints out here at joint practices. But I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. You know, unfortunately, I'm not in any moving vehicles. I'm in a stationary station. But either way, you know, we're having fun. I got to watch some football earlier today because the Saints actually live streamed their practice. So you kind of got to get to see a bit of the Saints versus Rams. Sean, you were there in person. You spent most of the day watching the offense. And, you know, we can't talk training camp. We can't talk offense without talking about quarterbacks. So that's the big picture we're going with today. Saints have that joint practice. Were you impressed by what you saw?
Well, there was a lot that I saw today at joint practices, so I'll keep it big picture because I think there was a lot of things you can gather from what we were able to see. It's obviously not the end-all, be-all, you know that, but you know, in some instances, these joint practices can be viewed with a higher level of evaluation and can be treated almost more serious than a preseason game because of the situation manipulation you can do. You can do first down, you can do second down, you can do 2 minute, you can do third down, you can do goal line, you can do red zone. I mean, there's a lot of situations you can manipulate in a joint practice that you can't necessarily do in a preseason game. I remember talking to Drew back in the day. We used to come out here for those Chargers joint practices. He used to love joint practices more than preseason games because obviously back then, by that point, he wasn't playing many preseason games, but also because of what I just said. But they talk about the situation manipulation and just being able to go one versus ones, because how often do you really get that in a couple of snaps? There is huge value, great value to these joint practices. There's even more value when you talk about the Saints, because the Saints are a team that's coming off a 5-12 season. They're going through some challenges in terms of there's a huge turnover, obviously the coaching staff, the roster, all those things. And you're going up against a mainstay. You're going up against one of the contenders in the NFC, a team that made the postseason last year, a team that has one of the best young coaches, a team that, it's a good measuring stick to see where you are when you. And from what I saw today, look, I thought there was some good work. There was some quality work. It was two fields at one time. Our photographer, Jeff Hager, by the way, he's right there. Say hey.
Don't forget the junior.
He's not forgetting the junior. He was watching more of the defense because we were just kind of, the fields were split, and where I was standing was on the offensive side. Saints offense versus Rams defense. And what I saw, there were a couple things. One, Rattler was the first guy with the first team, but they split reps almost down the middle. And with each period, whoever was the first team quarterback got the majority of the reps in that period. So first period, when Rattler was in, he got the majority of the reps. Second period, when Shuck was in, he got the majority of the first team reps. Got the majority of the reps total, not just first team reps, when they were with the first team. I'll just start there. Because, all eyes point to this every single day, and we've talked about it and talked about it and talked about it. And if you're looking for sort of a winner from today, I'm not sure I could truly pinpoint one. I thought both guys really, it's amazing how they mirrored each other pretty much all day. Early on, Spencer Rattler opened 8 for 9 in the opening period. He got sacked a couple times, but opened pretty sharp. And then Shuck went 4 or 5, kind of was able to match that. And then they both hit some struggles around the same time. And then they both finished somewhat strong. Spencer Rattler was able to throw a 50-yard touchdown bomb to Rashid Shaheed. It was his best throw of the day. Tyler Shuck, after an intentional grounding penalty to start the 2-minute drill, I think it was like a minute left, ball 35, 1 timeout, went on to complete 4 straight passes to get him in field goal range. He really bounced back nicely. He had a play where he threw a touchdown over the middle to Cedric Wilson in red zone for a touchdown, so that was his touchdown pass. So they both had that, but they both had challenges when it came to the Rams' defensive front. Some of that was on them, but a lot of it was on the offensive line, which to me was my biggest takeaway. Was this offensive line, for as much as they've invested in it, did not think they had their best day. That is a very, very active Rams defensive front. It's not an easy front to.
And Sean freezing there. Oh, there you go.
Penalties.
You just came back. Sorry, you froze for a second. I thought I had to take over, but you're good. Keep going. Sean freezing there again. Wait, there we go. We got you.
Got me?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Look, I think my big takeaway was the offensive line struggles were a little bit of an eye-opener, because that's a very good defensive front that they face. That's a very active defensive front, and you have a very highly invested offensive line. Had 4 or 5 starters playing, with the exception of obviously Trevor Penning and Dylan Radins playing in for him. And I felt like easily the Rams defensive line won that battle. So there were some good things that you saw from the offense. Both young quarterbacks faced a lot of adversity, but they both battled back. They both threw touchdown passes. They both sacked a couple of times. So I think today's practice was probably close to a draw. I hate sitting on the fence like that. I really do. I really wish I could say a true winner or a true loser, but I thought they both really mirrored each other. But the one thing that I thought was a little bit concerning was how but just not up to the standard the Saints' offensive line played.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the unit that we kind of expected to be the strongest for the team this year. You know, we talked a lot about the investment that they've put into the O-line, 4 first-round picks, a second-round pick that's a Pro Bowler and the best player on that unit, and Eric McCoy. And, you know, to see them kind of get bullied by the Rams' defensive front, it was a bit of a surprise to me, because the hope for this offensive line is that they can stand up against pretty much anybody that they see this year. Now, obviously, they are a little banged up, dealing with injuries. We talked about it Wednesday on the podcast. You've got, Will Clapp, who went on IR. You've got Trevor Penning, who's going to miss some time with injuries. So it's not necessarily your best 5, your starting 5 out there, but this is football, man. I mean, there's no guarantee that the Saints are going to have all 5 of their best 5 offensive linemen for 17 games. Unfortunately, the reality is they probably won't. Most teams don't keep their best 5 offensive linemen together, because this is a sport where it's a 100% rate of injury. Everybody's going to get hurt at some point, and that's why depth is so important. We talked about that Wednesday. So it was a bit of a surprise for me to see the Rams have so much success, because it was hard on Spencer Rattler. It was hard on Tyler Shuck. Just watching the stream, like, man, the Rams are all over these guys. And I thought it was interesting, you talking about the quarterbacks, you talked about Tyler Shuck kind of had his best moment in the red zone. Spencer Rattler had his best moment on a deep shot. It's almost ironic, because the way we've talked about these quarterbacks, it's almost like that's the other QB strength. We've talked about Tyler Shuck's willingness and ability to let that thing fly and throw the deep ball, and we saw it in the preseason game when he launched it to Mason Tipton for a touchdown. But Spencer Rattler, and I've said it over and over when we talk about him, I want to see him get some more consistency or be willing to throw that deep ball, and he hasn't had a lot of success early in his career last year and so far through training camp this year. So to see him go against the Rams and have that success on a deep pass, that's a good look for him. And Tyler Shuck, we talked about it, especially in OTAs and minicamp, how much more effective and comfortable Spencer Rattler looked in the red zone. Now Tyler Shuck is starting to get to a point where he's a little more confident. And like you said, these joint practices are very telling because, in the preseason, we saw maybe, a handful of plays with the starters in. A lot of the starters didn't even play, but watching the stream today, a lot of the starting lineup got, a healthy, amount of snaps for an extended amount of time. So, it's good to see both of them having an opportunity to work in with the ones. But yeah, my biggest takeaway from watching is kind of in line with what you said. The O-line was not very good, but I think Spencer and Tyler, they did a good job of kind of overcoming that and both having their ups, but they also had their downs, Sean.
Well, I was trying to listen closely there. We had a pack of motorcycles go past us just down there.
Yeah, I heard it. I was like, who is showing off on the interstate?
Yeah. But look, I'll just sort of piggyback a little bit on what you said. I was able to hear most of it. So I'll just start with, Tyler Shuck with the red zone. It was a design red zone period. He had a nice throw to Cedric Wilson over the middle of the field. It was the first touchdown of the day. He also had two misfires it was a shorter throw, but it was in the back of the end zone corner route. There was one where he missed just barely missed him, but it was a decent coverage. The other one, he had him, he just missed him, and he was not happy with himself after that. In Spencer Rattler's case, he struggled a little bit in the red zone. Didn't really do it, wasn't able to do a whole lot inside the red zone. But he was able to kind of rally a little bit because it was when he threw that 50-yard touchdown pass to Shaheed, it was a sequence where both he and Shuck were in the midst of their worst stretch of the practice. It was just they were missing reads. They weren't seeing the field particularly well. They were inaccurate with the football. Then all of a sudden, boom, he hits the big throw to Rashid Shaheed, and it really showed what Kellen Moore was talking about. Sometimes you got to know when to respond. So that was Rattler's moment to respond. And then the final period of practice was that 2-minute drill. And in that 2-minute drill, it could not have started worse for Tyler Shuck. There was some kind of it was a little bit of a weird snap to him, and he was able to kind of corral the snap. And then it was a confused play. And then at the last, he's getting blitzed. He kind of throws it, and the ball ricochets off Kelvin Banks Jr.'s helmet. So obviously that's an intentional grounding, an eligible receiver touching the football. So then they're back to 2nd and 20, under a minute left. And they always say in a 2-minute drill, you can't have any penalties or sacks or can ruin a 2-minute drill. So you're thinking this is not going to be a good situation for him. Then the very next play, he throws a deep corner route to Brandon Cooks. The play after that, he hits Rashid Shaheed. Then he hits Chris Olave. Then he clocks it. Then he throws a sideline ball to Juwan Johnson to get him in field goal range. There were no goalposts out there today. I'm not sure what was up with that. There were no goalposts out there, so they didn't actually kick the field goal. But again, it showed that they were able to respond. And look, that's a good thing. I mean, you want to be able to be, because it's this year especially, it's not going to be perfect. It is not going to be perfect. And you're going to be dealt with some tough situations that you're going to have to basically keep your right, mindset about you and not get down and respond. And that's a couple times we've seen that from Tyler Shuck, and that's good to see. And it's good to see it from Spencer Rattler as well, because, we talked about in the last podcast, Rattler had a little bit of a scouting report of start fast or start well, but then sort of fade as the game goes on. I think it happened a little bit in that preseason game. Well, in today's practice, he had a nice start to practice. Then it was kind of jumpy in the middle, or kind of whatever in the middle. But he was able to respond with that big touchdown pass in the midst of a string of consecutive bad plays. So that was certainly a good thing as well. I go back to my original feeling, and it's been my theme since the Sunday preseason opener. It's deadlock right now.
Yeah.
It's deadlock. Well, there's your answer. It's got to go to Tyler Shuck. I probably would agree that would probably be the way I would lean towards if it was just deadlocked. I would go with the guy I have invested $10 million in. I go with the guy that my coaching staff handpicked. However, we have been given no inclination that that's going to be that's their line of thinking. It could be something totally different. So that's why you have to let this thing play out. I think Tyler Shuck's going to start Sunday, but he didn't tell us that. I asked him about it. He would not reveal it. But if that's really, you're trying to do a complete evaluation, that's the last bit of information that you would need. So it was an, I'll call it an NFL day. It was some good moments, some bad moments, some young quarterback moments by both guys, but also some moments where you saw some flashes of why you could like both quarterbacks.
And with about 10 minutes left, Sean, you mentioned that preseason game coming up against the Jaguars, and this is the last time we'll podcast before that. So I kind of wanted to dive into who would potentially start that game. Obviously, Kellen not answering that question yet, but I know if it were me, I would start Tyler Shuck. Not even as from a perspective of, is this guy ahead of the other guy? It's simply that we saw Spencer Rattler start a preseason game. You're able to make that evaluation for Rattler. I'd like to see Tyler Shuck start one. Obviously the game plan may be a little different, those first few series than it will be for the rest. I want to see Tyler Shuck. Again, you don't know how many starters the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to play, but I want to see Tyler Shuck, be able to match up against the quote-unquote starting defense of the Jaguars in the Superdome so that we can really say, okay, we saw Rattler start, we saw Shuck start, and now going into that third preseason game, I think that's where, if you haven't made a decision on who to start by then, I think that third preseason game, the starting quarterback, that'll be kind of who Coach sees as being in the lead, at least if it's me making the decision. Who would you start week 2 against the Jaguars in the preseason?
There's no doubt. If we're just talking about Sunday, this is even if he was quote unquote losing, I would start Tyler Shuck right now, losing in the battle or behind in the battle, which I don't think he is. I think it's neck and neck. But even if he were, you got to see this guy in a game type situation with as many starters as possible, going up against at least a few starters from an NFL defense. Plus, he was inserted into the game last week during a 2-minute drill. I mean, I would like to see him from the opening kickoff, kind of let him feel out the game, get settled in into a game, and not have to start with a minute and 30 seconds left in the second quarter. So it would be no doubt Tyler Shuck starting in this game if it were up to me, because that's the last little. It would be great, and I don't know how they're going to play it with the third preseason game. But it would be great for this staff to kind of have an idea, but to have an idea of who they want to start after Sunday, like after that game. Basically, have enough data, enough information collected to have that guy in-house. So now you can prepare for the final preseason game, yes, but really get a head start on the Arizona Cardinals, because the Cardinals have their guy already in place, and they're already sort of, teams generally do that 2 weeks out. So it would be really nice to have the guy in place, and that way you can really start to hone in on the reps. You can really start to hone in on your game plan specific stuff as quickly as possible. In some ways, because you're in a quarterback competition, I'm not sure how many other quarterback competitions there are around the league right now, but you're a little bit behind because, a lot of these guys have their established starter. You don't. You still have to find that guy. So when some teams are kind of already in game plan mode or tweaking things to get ready for the season and finalizing their roster, you're trying to find your quarterback. So hopefully this is the last bit of information that they need, and whoever needs to step up or show them what they need to show them is able to do it this week, because I really feel like if it flows into the final preseason game, that would be somewhat of a disappointment, because I think you'd rather have a guy kind of locked and loaded, ready to go after this Sunday's game for the game 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now against the Arizona Cardinals, just because, look, I mean, you got to get ready at some point, and it's already going to be a challenge because you're going to have a young guy regardless. Get those guys as many reps as possible as you get closer and closer to the regular season.
Yeah, you mentioned disappointment. I would call it a disservice. Honestly, I think it's a disservice to Spencer Rattler and Tyler Shuck to let this battle go longer than it needs to go. Obviously, you want to make the right decision, but at this point, you've seen them in OTAs, you've seen them in minicamp, you've seen them in, 2-3 weeks of training camp. After Sunday, you've had 2 preseason games. the way that the reps are being distributed right now, it's almost like, 40% Rattler, 40% Shuck, and then the last 20% goes to Haener, if that. So obviously we know once the regular season starts, it's not going to be that. It'll be 90% of the snaps to QB1 with maybe 10% of the snaps going to whoever loses that battle. So the quicker you can get your starter, because like you mentioned, it's a young player. It's Spencer Rattler, who's only started 6 games. It's Tyler Shuck, who hasn't played any games in the NFL yet. So the sooner you can get your starter into, the process of, what the day-to-day would be once they are the starter, I think that helps. And especially when you look at the receivers. I mean, Chris Olave was hurt a lot last year. He didn't necessarily get a lot of time with Spencer Rattler. You could say the same thing about Rashid Shaheed. These guys are just meeting Tyler Shuck a couple months ago. So the quicker that you can get your starter taking that 90% of the reps and building the consistent, chemistry with their receivers and their offensive linemen, I think that only helps them. So for me personally, obviously I want you to make the right decision, but whether it's Shuck, whether it's Rattler, I want to know who your starting quarterback is going into that week 3 preseason game so that we can, a lot of teams use that as the quote unquote dress rehearsal. That's where you play the majority of your starters. I don't want that to be any different for the Saints if it was me, making that decision.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the current state of affairs for the Saints right now. I mean, there's just, and it's
Sean, there you go. You froze for a second, but you're back.
Most of the quarterback situations around the league, you would think that they pretty much have their guys set. Probably the Saints was probably the biggest toss-up of all of them, just in terms of who could potentially play, other than maybe the Browns at that up in Cleveland, other than who could potentially be the starter for day one. So we'll see. I mean, look, I think they're getting there, and you talk to Kellen Moore, you could tell he's getting close to wanting to have his guy. And I think once he has his guy, I think he said it on the Kay Adams interview, they're gonna rally behind that guy. So they're gonna give him as much as possible to allow that player to succeed. So whoever they turn to, it's not gonna be a 2-week thing. It's gonna be probably 6, 7, 8, 9 week thing, and they probably had to do a. But big picture, we like saying that out loud in this podcast. Big picture, don't underestimate just how far Shuck has come in this thing, because you and I both know those first 4 or 5 practices, that first week and a half of camp, he looked nowhere near close to being a starter.
Yeah.
And now he's closed the gap to where you talk to some of the veterans, they're like, it's going to be a very tough decision. And so if it's a tough decision and it's that close, you just wonder who they ultimately turn to.
Absolutely, and we've still got about 4 minutes left, so I want to switch sides real quick. I know you spent a lot of time with the offense, but the defense was practicing on another field. We talked about how the O-line was banged up, and it kind of showed against, the pass rush of the Rams, where the Rams were really dominant up front. The secondary is also banged up. They're missing out on their number 1 cornerback, and Alontae Taylor. Obviously, the Rams also banged up on offense. They're missing out on their quarterback, Matthew Stafford. On the defensive side of the ball, how did the Saints fare in today's joint practice? Sean freezing up there, and watching the stream back here, I didn't get to see too much of the Saints defense because the stream was mainly focused on offense. But, from what I hear, the Rams, they definitely looked like the better team. Sean and I were talking, before this podcast started, and the Rams, and again, this is a team that we're expecting to be in the mix for, to be in the postseason this season, So when you put them against the Saints, a team that's trying to build, a team that's trying to learn, you're going to see a bit of a stark difference. But at the end of the day, I think that both teams got something from today's joint practice. For the Rams, if you remember, they were supposed to start, against the Chargers, the Saints. They didn't have any joint practices, and I think that Kellen Moore would be happy that he was able to get one in against the Rams. And Sean, I see you moving. I think we got you back. Did you hear my question about the defense?
I did.
There we go.
So I apologize for the freeze there, but look, from what I was able to information I was able to gather from Jeff Hager, our photographer, Julian Blackmon had another interception. That's now 3 days in a row he's had an interception. I mean, you talk about a guy that's come and fit right in. I mean, it's really something. Jordan Howden on a wounded duck throw from Stetson Bennett had another interception. I wasn't able to see Chase Young, but based off what all the questions were afterwards and all the talk was afterwards on that side of the field, Chase Young had himself a day, and Chase Young is once again becoming that standout defensive player during training camp that he was last year. Hopefully that can translate when the regular season starts, because they're going to need him to be dominant. And I will say this, once again, big picture. I think the Saints defense is going to be okay this year. They're not going to be great because I think they're going to be on the field a lot. But I think they could be a top half defense. And given how much they could be on the field, I think that would be quite an accomplishment. So I think the Saints defense is actually going to be okay this year.
I agree, but, obviously health is a big question mark there. Alontae Taylor, we talked about it on Wednesday. If he misses a, sizable chunk of time, that secondary is in trouble. But again, we're still learning Kellen Moore. When Kellen Moore says, he's going to miss a little bit of time, what does that mean? That means he could be back next week. That means we might see him till week 5. We still trying to, understand the nuances of Kellen Moore, Sean. But with, a minute left in this podcast, I will ask you, would you expect to see more starters on Sunday? Because a lot of the starters took that first preseason game off.
You see a lot of them play today.
Yeah.
And the way he approached the final scrimmage before the Sunday opener, but they played a lot in the scrimmage. They didn't play much in the preseason opener, with the exception of quarterbacks. So a lot played today. So be very curious if they play Sunday. And if they don't play Sunday, I bet, like you said, that third preseason game is going to be more of that dress rehearsal for the first team. But I don't know. I hope a lot of starters play, but I don't know that's going to happen on Sunday. Absolutely,
and we'll definitely have our eyes on the big two. Obviously, Tyler Shuck, Spencer Rattler, Bub Means going on IR yesterday. So, a Mason Tipton, who's had a very good camp, had that big catch in the first preseason game. We're going to expect him to hopefully step up as we go into preseason week 2, where we try to sort this whole quarterback battle out. That's all the time we got for today. Sean, thank you for joining me from California. I'm Andre Johnson Jr. Catch us next time on Overtime.